Happy New Year, everybody! It is my first official video of 2021. In 2020, one of my resolutions was to read 12 books and the Harry Potter series, and I blacked out and read 46 books, which is insane to me because I read like one book in the past 5 years, so I don't know what happened. So I'm gonna share all of the books that I read in 2020 from worst to best, and I also thought this video would be very inspiring for anyone who is looking to get into reading this year and doesn't know where to start. So I highly recommend starting with some of the books that are on my best list. Before I get into that, I want to thank today's sponsor, which is Book of the Month, which is such a great way to start getting into reading this year. I know a lot of you guys have resolutions to read 5 books, 10 books, 12 books this year, and I feel like Book of the Month is such a great way to do that and kick off your goals. If you've never heard of Book of the Month, they are a super popular online book subscription service, and they promote new and emerging authors to help readers discover really fun new books and get into reading again, you know? I know personally I was so lost at where to start getting into reading and find new books to read that I would actually be into, and their team actually curates 5 books every single month, so they just take out all the guesswork. You don't even have to look, and a lot of them are new and early release books. And if you do choose to sign up for their subscription, you get your first book for only $9.99 with the code NEWBOOKS, and I will link them down below. This is like the best price for new hardcover fiction, you guys, I'm telling you. And you get your book delivered straight to your door every single month, so it's a great way to just hold yourself accountable and set a goal for reading every single month. Comment down below what your reading goal is for 2021 because I'm really curious. Now let's get into my 2020 books. I have ranked them from worst to best. And of course, if you love any of these books that are on my worst list, please don't take it personally. We all have just different tastes in books. I personally love thrillers and romances. I did not read any books that I would consider a 1 star or like 0 stars. Let's start off with the worst books I read in 2020, a 2 star. The worst book that I would consider that I read this year is The Mother-in-Law by Sally Hepworth. This whole book is supposed to be about a monster mother-in-law, and it was supposed to be a thriller. It was not. But the worst part about this book is that the mother-in-law isn't even a monster. She's just a normal, caring mother-in-law. Like, sue her. It's supposed to be thrilling. It left me yawning. So, next. Park Avenue Summer by Renee Rosen. Not sure how to pronounce her last name. I feel really bad for putting this on my worst list. I know it's one of my friend Katie's like favorite books, and so many people love this book. I just don't love historical fiction. It's not for me. I could not get into this. It took me weeks to read this book because I was so bored. The setting of New York City is obviously magical and glamorous, but there's just not enough romance for me or thrill, so it just left me feeling super bored. And the last book that was a 2 star for me was The Woman in the Window by AJ Finn. No. This was just a horrible ripoff of Rear Window. There was so much fluff that could have been condensed. So repetitive, just her using movie references that nobody probably has seen or would know. The narrator was like blacked out on pills half the book. It was just a huge no for me. After I posted my review, a lot of you let me know that this author sucks. Just super deceptive, so we don't support him. Moving on to my 3 stars. I had quite a few 3-star books, and some of these actually were in my 4-star when I initially posted them on my review highlight on Instagram. But something that was, higher rated for me ended up being lower once I read other books that were better. The first book was The Wives by Tarryn Fisher. I really liked the premise of this book. It's about a woman whose husband has 2 different wives who she's never met until she, stalks them and ends up befriending one of the wives. She ends up thinking that her husband is hurting her, so she starts to investigate her husband and see if, he's really who he says he is. Kind of thought the twist was a cop-out, so it was just okay. Maybe Not by Colleen Hoover is the second book in a 3-part series of her Maybe series. I loved the other 2 way more, so I'll discuss the actual plot of this later. But the second one was just a novella, so it was super short, and it was just okay. It just didn't have much depth. Colleen Hoover is such an amazing author. She's my favorite author now. And this book just didn't have much romance at all. It was just straight to the sex, and that was it. Like, there was no tension. Like, build me up, woo me. The Chain by Adrian McKinty was our October book of the month because it's very like spooky horror kind of murdery. Would I read it at any other month of the year? No. Would I recommend it? Not really. There's so many better thrillers that I've read this year that I would recommend before this one. You basically enter the chain when your child is kidnapped, and the only way to get your child back is to successfully kidnap someone else's child. Really unique concept, but I felt like it could have been executed a lot better. Reputation by Sarah Shepard. This is the author of Pretty Little Liars, so I dabbled in a couple of her books this year, but this one's about a university hacking scandal and a murder that's caught up in the middle of it. It's a whodunit that is the perspective of like 5 different people involved, but my gut was right from the beginning of this book. All of the characters are unlikable, shitty people. So, it's like you can't really relate to them. Hopefully. Next one is The Couple Next Door by Sherry Lapina. This one was a really quick read. I think I read it in like 2 sittings, but this one's about a couple whose baby actually goes missing while they're just next door at their neighbor's house. So this one's another whodunit between the couple, their parents, and the detective. The writing in this I felt like was super amateur. I feel like she kept repeating the same shit over and over again, and I was just like, over it. All of the twists were extremely predictable. The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. This one is like a psychological suspense novel about a family cult, which love. This one took me about like 100 pages to get into it because there's 3 different perspectives and I didn't know how they related to each other. Some of them were in the past, some in the future. So it's just a little confusing. But once I got that down, I got hooked and I like flew through the rest of the book. There were a lot of twists and what you think is happening just keeps changing. So I did really like being taken on that ride. Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This was the first book that I picked for Bees Book Club, which if you didn't know, I have an online book club. I'll link it down below. Man, when I tell you, I felt horrible for picking this as my book club pick, especially the first one. Everyone probably thought I was so disturbing because I had no idea what I was getting into with this book. The summary did not tell me how dark and disturbing this was. I had so many nightmares reading this. Like my stomach was clenching reading this. Very graphic torture and murder scene. It also just had a lot of plot holes and predictable twists, things that just like they brought up, never mentioned again. We discussed this with the book club. I was like, man, that was really annoying. When Life Gives You Lemons by Lauren Weisberger. This was actually the first book that I ever read in 2020. So I had nothing to compare it to, but I really enjoyed it and it got me into reading because it was so lighthearted. It's actually the 3rd book, I believe, in the Devil Wears Prada series. You can kind of pick it up wherever because this one follows Emily's life. If you're familiar with Devil Wears Prada, it's kind of like Real Housewives in a book. Layla by Colleen Hoover. This one is actually her newest book. This was her first book to dive into the paranormal realm, and she kind of described it as a hybrid between a thriller like Verity that she wrote and her romance is what she is known for. I actually did not know it was a ghost story when I started reading it, so I was so thrown off by that. I didn't hate it, but I probably would have if it wasn't written by Colleen Hoover because she was able to execute it in a way that was still successful in my book. Would I recommend it? No. She just has so many other amazing books. The last 3-star book for me was The Heiresses by Sarah Shepard. Very similar vibe to Pretty Little Liars. It's about like a family, the Saybrooks, which is like rich siblings, and one of them dies. Did she actually kill herself, or was this more sinister? Did someone actually murder her? This was a nice light read, but it ended on a huge cliffhanger and there's no sequel in sight. So I was super pissed off. So Sarah, if you're watching this, give me a sequel. Moving along to my 4-star reviewed books. The first 4-star book I have is Maybe Now by Colleen Hoover. This is the 3rd and final book of the Maybe series. Glad I read it. We got more insight into some of the other characters that didn't play a huge part in the first book. Was it as amazing as the first one? Hell no. Did we still enjoy it? Hell yes. Winging It by Emma Isaacs was one of the 2 like self-improvement books that I read this year. I tried really hard not to do any this year, but I couldn't help myself. I really liked this book. The whole theme of this book is just how to wing it, stop overthinking things, take action without having to overplan everything and have everything figured out before you execute something, which it was just something that I really needed to hear and something that is just a really great reminder. My next book is One Day in December by Josie Silver. This was our December book of the month. Again, I probably wouldn't read this book any other month in December. Not like it's a Christmas book by any means, but I don't know. It's not like like my typical kind of book. Follows kind of like a love triangle over a 10-year span. It was kind of slow for me, to be honest. It wasn't my favorite romance book that I've read by any means, but after a while I started liking these characters and like this book a lot more. It just got more like in depth with their internal feelings. Next, we have The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. This was my first Riley Sager book that I've ever read, so I heard he has a lot of great ones and I'm excited to continue reading more of his books. I like the setting of this. It took place at a summer camp. It's a group of like 4 girls, 3 of them go missing, and the one that didn't ends up trying to figure out what happened to her 3 friends many years later. That's all I can say, but they had some really good twists in this. Did take me about 100 pages again to get into this, but once you get past that, it gets good. Another Riley Sager book I read was Lock Every Door. I really liked this book. Again, I think the settings of his books are just really fun and different. This one follows a girl who's an apartment sitter. Like, she basically gets paid to live at this amazing apartment, like super historic in New York City. She befriends another sitter there who actually ends up going missing. And yeah, weird shit just goes down at this complex, so she starts trying to figure out what's actually going on here and who to trust in this apartment complex. It is a wild ride. You once you think she's got it figured out, it takes a whole other turn, okay? Next, we have The Perfect Couple by Erin Hildebrand. This was a fun beach read murder mystery that takes place at a wedding, and there's a murder there. I know it sounds a lot like The Guest List, but I like that one better. More of a mystery than a thriller, kind of a whodunit vibe. It was fun. The Bromance Book Club by Lyssa Kay Adams. Okay, I genuinely started this book as a joke. None of my books were ready at the library, so I was just sifting through Goodreads and found something that was recommended to me. I was like, I'll read this for a day, just, you know, in between waiting for my book. But I was pleasantly surprised. But basically, it's about a group of guys who started this book club and like bring a new guy in whenever they're having like marriage issues, you know, they're on the brink of divorce. They start this book club to read romance novels and like take those tips that they learned and implement them into basically wooing back their wives. It's funny and it got steamy. We got the romance, and it's also like a trilogy, I think. The last 4-star book I have is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This was the one I was talking about that's very similar concept to The Perfect Couple. It also takes place at a wedding. There's also a murder at the wedding, and it takes place on a very like secluded, creepy island. You actually don't know like who is murdered until like way later in the book. Not only do you have to figure out like who done it, but you have to figure out like who is it. But I will say this one was really slow until the 70% mark, and then whew! And to finish it off, we have all of my 5-star books. Woo woo! I am generous with my 5 stars. I understand, but I read so many books this year that I really, really liked, okay? So the first one was An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pickanen. Super unique style though. This one was about a morality study participant, and you're just constantly questioning like, is this scenario part of the study? Who is the reliable narrator here? Is this even a legit study? Not my all-time favorite thriller, but definitely one that I recommend after reading a couple other thrillers first. Before She Knew Him by Peter Swanson is another book. Sounds like The Couple Next Door, but it's about a couple and the couple next door. But the new neighbor is convinced that the neighbor is a serial killer. You got an unreliable narrator, you got a crazy twist. I mean, the recipe for a perfect thriller. High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard. I do not know where to put these self-help books among thrillers and romances, so, you know, I'm just throwing these in here. It's just a 5-star, okay? I really, really enjoyed this book. This was the only other self-help book that I read this year, so very proud of myself. But this one was my favorite because it really was super helpful. It wasn't just like telling me fluff. It's just about changing your habits and like what high performers do every single day, the little things that add up. It also helped me find like clarity. Definitely a book that you're gonna continue to go back to. White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. Definitely the most important book that I read this year by far. Funny, it was the shortest book I read this year, but it actually took me one of the longest to get through because I was trying to digest it and not just like fly through it just to read it, you know what I mean? I was really trying to like sit with what she was talking about, and this is actually the first book I've ever read on race and racism, but I learned so much from this book, and I know there are tons of books on race and racism by Black authors, so if you do have any recommendations that you've read either recently or you've heard good things about, please let me know down below because I want to continue my learning. Moving along, we have The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. This one was a very easy binge read for me. The first third is the point of view of like a crazy bitch who's basically trying to ruin a marriage. Then it goes into the point of view of the wife, and whew, it gets juicier and juicier. This book definitely had a lot of fluff that could have been cut out to make it shorter, but overall, this was really good one. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. Do I even need to discuss? No. And then we have Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, even better. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I know a lot of people hated this book, okay, but I will say it's higher rated for me because I had really low expectations going into this because, again, I've never read the Harry Potter books fully, but what I thought was interesting is it's the shortest movie of the Harry Potters, but it's one of the longest books. There was just so much more information in this book that I had never heard about, and that's what made it so interesting to me because I just learned so much. Next, we have My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. This one's about a serial killer couple who has a double life as your typical suburban family. This is from the husband's point of view, which is fun and different, and the ending makes this so high rated for me because I was just like, what? Next, we have Open Book by Jessica Simpson, the queen, Jessica Simpson. It's funny, growing up, I actually was way more of like a Britney gal than a Jessica Simpson. It was honestly a great memoir that exceeded my expectations. Definitely the best celebrity memoir that I've ever read. It's just really cool to like see her recap like growing up and just the pressures of Hollywood and being in the spotlight and all the way up until, you know, her huge divorce with Nick Lachey and meeting her now husband. And it's just really cool to see all of the ups and downs that she's had, and she's just so incredibly successful. Great memoir. Next book by one of my favorite author duos is You Are Not Alone by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Buchanan. This is a twisty thriller that kept me up at night. This one's about a girl who witnesses a death, just kind of wrong place, wrong time, and she ends up in a series of events. She befriends the dead girl's friend group, weird flex, but those said friends have a ploy of their own. So it's really cool to see kind of both of their point of views and not knowing what the other is thinking. Read it. Read it. Same authors, we have The Wife Between Us, and this one was my favorite out of the books that they've written. 10 out of 10 thriller for me, you guys. This one was so good. Without giving anything away, is that it's about a girl, her husband, and his mistress. Or is it? Dun, dun, dun. Big twist in this one, kind of Gone Girl vibes. Even the epilogue had me like, Where the Crawdaddies Sing by Delia Owens. This one was super different from any books that I typically read, but it was still like had like a mystery element in it. There was a lot of hype about this book, but it was kind of a slow build for me. But yeah, this one like tugs on your heartstrings and is heartbreaking at times, but it basically is about a girl, like a marsh girl, who is abandoned and kind of just has to grow up on her own and is like exiled from society. This was one where I also kind of thought it was going one way, but it took a different turn, like the end, and it was just like really, it was a good ending for me. Next, we have Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. This was my first Gillian Flynn novel that I've ever read, and I definitely want to read more of her books in 2021 because she has such a unique writing style. Like, I feel like she gets so in depth with her characters, like more than I've ever read. But this one was a very dark and twisted story. Definitely proceed with caution with this one because it's potentially very triggering, but I did love this story. The ending had me tweaking, and there's also an HBO series with Amy Adams, which is really cool. So after you read it, you can watch the miniseries. It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is Coho's like most loved and praised book of all time. Definitely deals with some more heavy topics than she normally goes for, but it is still kind of a romance book. But I really like this because it's such a beautiful story that deals with the complexities of relationships. And again, it's one of those that shows that like relationships aren't so black and white. Another Colleen Hoover book I loved was Heartbones, and this was one of the most recent books that I read in December, and I think she wrote this book in 2020 as well. Another like beautiful romance story about two people who think they're very damaged and they really relate to each other on like another level that most people can't, but they're both leaving each other at the end of the summer, so they know like this romance won't last. Next, we have The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. Highly recommend. This is one of my favorite thrillers that I read this year. I was just unwell reading this. This one's about a woman who is sent to a psych ward after murdering her husband, and ever since she did, she's been silent. Nobody knows what actually happened. So a psychotherapist is like super intrigued by her, and he starts working at the psych ward that she does so he can try to like uncover what really happened and try to get her to speak. And let me just say, like, you will not be able to put this down. Next, we have Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. Yet again, I know, can't you see she's my favorite author? This one is like the steamiest book I read this year. This is about a guy who basically like will not reveal his past to this girl, and she's, you know, wants to know why he is the way he is because he's super guarded and closed off. But simultaneously, as we're getting those chapters, we also get get glimpses into this guy's past. Really enjoyed this book. Again, very steamy, so like proceed with caution. Next we have Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Chef's Kiss, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Devastated to have finished the series. And my favorite Harry Potter was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. It's my favorite movie, so just made sense that it was my favorite book. The Triwizard Tournament is just iconic. You guys, we're almost done. My second favorite book of the year that I read was Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover. So this was the book that, again, is a series. This is the first book, and it was one of my favorite books of the year, which I did not expect. Again, I went into this book blindly. I've just been going into Colleen Hoover books like that lately because I would rather just be surprised. I'm gonna go into it like that. I don't want to give it away, but basically it's about a girl who finds out that her boyfriend of a long time has been cheating on her with her best friend. So she basically has nowhere to live, but this other guy in her apartment, Ridge, takes her in, lets her live with him and his friends, and kind of just navigates their whole relationship. He has a girlfriend, she's newly single, but they have this common interest in writing songs together. It's really cool because you get to see like them writing songs together and writing these lyrics. I don't know, it's fascinating to me. And you can also listen to these songs while you're reading it because she actually teamed up with like Griffin Peterson. They actually like made these songs come to life. I can't even begin. Like, this story wrecked me. Like, it was so sweet. It was one of those books that you just do not want to end. And as soon as I finished it, I was about to restart it because I was like, I can't give these characters up. So when I found out there were 2 more, I was like, absolutely. My favorite book that I read this year, which is no surprise because I can't stop talking about it, is Verity, also by Colleen Hoover. But this one was her first ever thriller that she wrote, because again, she writes a lot of romance books. You know, I just love this. I couldn't decide if I like this one more than A Silent Patient, but they're both fire, okay? Your heart is racing the entire time. You will binge this because you just cannot put it down. And it's one of those books that the ending is kind of like up to your interpretation. And I love when that happens. Like, it's frustrating, but it's also like, we've had some good chats about it. So if you've read it, I would love to hear how you interpreted the ending if you DM me so we don't give away any spoilers. I highly recommend getting the Goodreads app. You guys can follow me at goodreads.com/CaitlinB. This is why I read so much, because I was motivated to track my books. I'm so motivated by numbers. All in all, my year for 2020, I read 46 books and 17,797 pages. My shortest book was White Fragility at 154 pages, and my longest book was Order of the Phoenix, which was 870 pages. Average book length was 386. Super cool. I love it. But those are all of the books that I read in 2020 from worst to best. I did omit 2 books, I think, because they were influencer memoirs, and I just have no idea how to rank them amongst thrillers and romances. I even had trouble ranking like Jessica Simpson's book in there, as well as the 2 like self-help books. So I'm not a booktuber, but still great as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will link all of the books that I read down the description box below if you want to check them out. Let me know again what your reading challenge is for 2021, or just like a favorite book that you've read recently, because I am always looking for new reads. Don't forget to check out Book of the Month. I will link them down below. Other than that, I hope you guys have a fabulous day, and I will see you in my next video. Mwah!